Hello, everyone. Welcome to Helping Your Wives Flourish by Ed Dickerson. We thank you for joining us this evening. I'm going to introduce our speaker for the evening. Ed Dickerson has published 3 books, scores of articles, and was singled out for recognition by the governor of the state of Iowa, and has taught at every level from grade school to grad school. Audiences on 3 continents have found he speaks with wit, warmth, and wisdom. He holds a master's degree in religious education from Andrews University, conducts Bible studies in person as well as over the internet, and makes a wealth of material available online. He and his wife Mavis have 3 grown children and 8 grandchildren. I'll introduce Adam.
I like to think of myself as an exceptional grandparent, but I'm told I'll have to wait a while to be a great grandparent. Anyway, I'm going to talk about helping your wives flourish. Everybody's heard happy wife, happy life. That's generally a pretty good thing, good rule to follow. But we're not very good at doing that. And especially in the last 30 or 40 years, there's been a continual erosion of the family. More and more children are born out of wedlock. There are fewer and fewer families who get married and stay married. And people just seem to have a great deal of trouble. And one of the problems is that women are under an impossible amount of pressure to have a job, to be a mom, to find, they say, the work-family balance. Well, guys, we need to find a work-family balance too. But the main thing is, how can you help your wife to become a truly flourishing wife? It's God's will that we all flourish. And it's one of the primary duties and honors of a husband to help his wife flourish. And in so doing, he will flourish, and so will the rest of the family. Can we get the first slide up? One of the problems about this is that we're very good at knowing certain things about helping things flourish, but helping your wives flourish, helping people flourish is not something we're particularly good at. Since it's already been remarked on, this is also AI. Took quite a while to get that done. Anyway, AI is fascinating and frustrating. We know what plants need to flourish. Basic ingredients. If you have an acorn, you want to plant an oak tree, first of all, you need rich soil, right? Then you need rain, you need water. And finally, I'm putting it last, but it's not the least, in fact, it's the most important. They need sunlight. Because without sunlight, nothing happens. Sunlight drives the rain, feeds the plants. Sunlight is, so we've named them in reverse order of importance, but they're very important. I say reverse order because you can raise certain things hydroponically with no soil. You can raise them in water. Yet for a flourishing garden, and one of my daughters is quite the gardener, you need to have all 3. So, what wives need to flourish? Would you say that this is a picture of a wife who's flourishing? Probably not. And there's one who is. What's the difference between the two? That you can see, the significant difference between the two. One has a full cup and one has an empty cup, because we're going to be talking about that. I wasn't going to have illustrations of a wife with a cup, except that I kept getting them when I asked for pictures of a wife. So there you are. These are also AI. What fills someone's cup? It's true of everyone, but we're talking about helping wives flourish. And so we want to talk specifically about what will help fill a wife's cup, what makes it work better. And the first thing is this understanding that she is precious. This may seem a little strange, but it's really important for people to know they have value. We see again and again in this world that people feel they have no value, they have no worth, and if they do, it's based upon their performance. And the problem with that is, well, there are lots of problems with it, but one of the big problems is nobody's perfect. And it's easier for us to remember the negative things that happen and the negative events and negative reactions we get than it is the positive ones. But especially since we're in a Christian setting, it's important to know that each individual is precious. And you need to, husbands, you need to communicate to your wives clearly that she is precious. Now, what does this mean? Well, we want to get down into the nitty-gritty. Of course, I put it in the middle of that cup. Remember that empty cup? Well, here's a full cup. And it starts in the center with being precious. Okay? And that means the person is of infinite value. Again, for Christians, this shouldn't be too hard to understand, that every individual is worth infinite value. But the practicality of this is, if a person is worth less than infinite value, then they are equivalent in value to either one other or many other objects. And I could trade a person for those objects. Well, we've seen that done, haven't we? Where people are traded for objects, whether it's money or whatever. And whether it's called slavery or prostitution or something like that, it's not pretty, it's ugly. So it's the first thing you need to understand is that every individual, this can be applied to your children, it can be applied to husbands, but especially men, let's face it. The story is told, it's probably apocryphal, of a couple that went to a marriage therapist after 30 years of marriage, and they're having trouble. And the wife says, he never tells me he loves me. And his reply was, I told you that 30 years ago. If I change my mind, I'll let you know. Well, a lot of men are very uncommunicative, aren't they? We have a hard time formulating those words and saying those things. And so we're going to look at how to do that. I could say a person is precious, but it's not going to help you much unless I give you examples of how to express that. Now, there's a lot more material that we're going to be even able to touch in this short presentation today. But we'll get you started. First of all, you have to know, you have to have new knowledge, a new understanding of how to do this. The second thing is you'll need to have new perception, because what happens is people get new knowledge, but they don't see something happening when it is happening. They know about it, but they don't see it as it happens. And maybe 2 days later, this is why it's good to keep a journal. 2 days later you go, oh, I missed that one. And the third thing then is you have to have different responses, because we want to have new knowledge, which leads to new perceptions, which leads to new behaviors at the appropriate time. So you know what to look for, you see it when it happens, and you respond appropriately when it happens. That's a pretty complex thing to do. And that's what we're going to try. We're going to give you first the knowledge, and two, a general guideline on how to pull this off, how to make it work. So this is important. Your wife is of infinite value. All the treasures of heaven were spent on her. And it's important for her to recognize that. Infinite behavior does not change value. That's important to understand. Behavior does not change value. It may change your relationship. It may end a relationship, but it doesn't change value. This is important for husbands to tell wives and to tell children. You know, I was raised in a situation where if you do wrong, Jesus doesn't love you, or he will be disappointed. That's not good. You know, what we had to say to our poor firstborn. You know, firstborns suffer the difficulty of having two earnest parents who are inexperienced lavish all of their attention on them. On this one child, that's a heavy burden. But what we said to our oldest was, if you do things that are bad, Jesus will always love you, and mommy and daddy will always love you. The neighbors may not like you much. other people. And since we want you to get along with other people, we want to help you understand it. But we will never stop loving you because of what you do. Now, that's hard to follow through on. We're all imperfect. But behavior does not change value. It may change your relationship. And don't go overboard with this. Obviously, when people commit crimes, sometimes they have no boundaries, and so we put them in a place that has very strong boundaries because they won't recognize others. But boundaries is for another day. Point is that behavior may change the relationship, but it does not change the value of the person. So the second important thing to understand is that each one is unique. And by the way, I'm going to tell you this. These messages must be conveyed in this order at any given time. Because if you don't start at the right place, you're going to end up with problems. The other thing I have to tell you is these are true ways of helping people flourish, but I cannot stop you from misusing them. You can use them to manipulate people. The difference is you do it here because you want what is best for the other person. You manipulate people because you want something, whether that's best for them or not. Okay? So you know that as you share and understand these techniques, you'll understand. Now, unique is a fascinating thing. Precious, the value of an individual, behavior does not change it. Our society is not good at that. And I'm not taking a political position to say that's why abortion is okay, because you can't, a child in the uterus cannot do much. They have no, but you know what? I'm getting older. I can't do as much as I used to either. And we also have euthanasia because people don't do as much. And if we value people according to what they can do, then the smallest and the youngest and the oldest and the sickest have less value. And that will lead us to really bad things. And so it is not what you can do or not do. Your value never changes. When you discover that a couple announces and discovers they're pregnant, that's a precious moment. And the relationship between parent and child should be precious throughout their lives. And when someone dies, their memory can be precious. The Jews have a wonderful saying, may her memory be a blessing. That remains precious. So understand, precious never changes. It cannot be diminished by behavior. Uniqueness is something else. Uniqueness means that in all of time and space, there's no one else exactly like you. Now, I say this, that in eternity, when the righteous, the redeemed, are singing on the sea of glass, some notes won't be there because people will they've chosen not to be there. And that diminishes the experience of the entire universe because that unique sound is not there. There is a song only you can sing. There is a place only you can fill. There is a function, a mission for which you are uniquely prepared by God. So that's really important. You're the only one who will ever be you. Or as some comedian said, it's very apt though, he said, be yourself. Everyone else is taken. It's true. All the time, in space, no one else is exactly like you. It's important to keep that in mind. You are one of a kind, incomparable and unrepeatable. One of the worst things that we do is we say to someone, if only you could be more like your dad. If only you could be more like your sister. If only you could be like whoever else. No, you need to be who you are uniquely. It doesn't mean you need to be a bad person for the sake of it, but it means that you have a unique place to fill and that your differences in God's sight are not handicaps or difficulties. They are wonderful enhancements. And that's important to understand this. Incomparable, don't compare people with one another. Unrepeatable, there's only one you, and there will only ever be that one you. So we said your value never changes. Does uniqueness change? No. But it may or may not be fully expressed. Now, I get in trouble every time I say this with my wife and others. Babies are an awful lot alike. And at this point, I get to hear a chorus saying, no, they're not. But babies have a lot more in common, I think, than they do differences. And that's as far as I'm going to go. But as children grow, as individuals mature, we see more and more of their uniqueness, or we can see more and more of their uniqueness expressed. And one of the functions of a parent and one of the functions of a husband is to help his wife's uniqueness to be expressed. Now, society doesn't like this, do they? Society wants you to be the same. They want you to fit in. They've got a role for you. They want you to be like somebody else. They want you to conform to their needs. It's like you take a diamond with all the wonderful facets and you say, you know what? There's too many facets here. We need to round this off. But that's what a raw diamond looks like. By the way, if there are any questions here or even online, someone can watch the online. I'd be glad to answer any questions that may arise. What are we doing here? All right. I may have less than an hour than I thought. All right. Your uniqueness may or may not be fully expressed. To the degree you make your contribution to the universe is enriched. Can you tell that to your wife? To the degree that she expresses her uniqueness and makes that contribution, the universe is enriched. And how about your life, husbands? Isn't your life enriched? You see, this is part of the problem, part of the process. We need to understand this, that as their uniqueness is expressed, because God has made everyone different. He makes every snowflake different, every leaf on every tree different. Surely he's expressed as much care for those who he died for, those who created, to be his friends. And so you're unique, each one of you, and we want to increase that, and we want to help you express that, because to that degree, we will be enriched. All right. To the degree that you fail to make that or are blocked from making that contribution, the universe is diminished. Now, in eternity, that'll be taken care of. But in this earth, a lot of life is diminished because people's uniqueness is being suppressed, is not being fostered, is not being promoted. Yeah, it's going to be a short day. Peter, seeing this other man, said to Jesus, Lord, what about this man? This is John 21 when Jesus restores Peter and feed my sheep. And then he points to John. Of course, John is so shy, he never says that. John almost never mentions his name in his own gospel. He just says to that disciple, or to the disciple God loved. By the way, if you read the Gospels through, as I've been doing with my wife recently, Peter and John are an item. They hang around a lot. They're involved with each other a lot. It's fascinating to watch. So here's Peter, naturally, he's pointing to the other. He says, what about him? Now you're telling me this is what's going to happen to me. What's going to happen to him? Because the rumor had gone around that John would live until Jesus returned. And what did Jesus say? If I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. Don't concern yourself in that way with somebody else's uniqueness. Help them express it, but you're not going to be doing the same thing as they're doing. Did it ever occur to you that when it says, in my Father's house are many mansions, and I go to prepare a place for you, that your place, Eleanor, Mavis, will not be the same as Ansel's place? Because you're different people. Your place will be different than every other one. It is made just for you. As C.S. Lewis says, like a glove is made for a hand. Okay? And so God recognizes our uniqueness. And each one of us has a path to follow, a mission to perform, and a contribution to make that no one else can make. And so we need to make sure that they understand this, our wives understand this. Now, I've said this already, I want to say it again, it has to go in this order. We'll get to that in a minute. There is no higher calling than the one God has called you to do. Whatever it is. Doesn't matter what job you're in. Doesn't matter what state you live in or what country you live in. Doesn't matter your status in life. God has a calling for you. He has a place for you. And you will do that by expressing your uniqueness. Okay? But people say, well, I don't have what it takes. I may be unique, but I don't have any way of expressing it. Let's get there. The final one that fills the cup is capable. And you can see why I put the letters in the order they were, why we start at the center. Your cup is literally filled. Now, you're capable. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting education. I'm not saying you shouldn't. That's a way of enhancing your capabilities. But I'm telling you, wherever you find yourself, you are capable in some way of fulfilling your uniqueness, of expressing it fully. I tell this story because it's true and because it does away with all excuses. It's been about 30 years ago or more, 40 years ago, that my wife and I were involved with tropical fish. We had this wonderful place, and we had a nice collection of tropical fish. And I was reading, there was a Tropical Fish Hobbyist, I think was the name of the magazine. And every month in that magazine, I saw that there was one author. He wasn't listed on the editorial board, but he had an article every month. He was very prolific. He wrote month after month after month, there was an article. And this guy was good. It was only after a couple of years that I found out that he was a quadriplegic. He couldn't use his hands or his feet. This was in the days before computers. There were no personal computers. Computers were large machines that filled the room this size. So what he did was he got a paintbrush, put it in his mouth, and he would touch it to the keys of an electric typewriter. And that's the way he wrote his articles. Don't tell me you can't. It's amazing, you know. He wrote, and I say there was an article every month. It's quite a chore. God's biddings are enablings. And whatever he has created you to do, whatever mission he's created you to fulfill, you can do it. He will aid you to do it in some fashion. And again, we need to make this clear. We need to make it clear to our wives. We want them to flourish. First of all, they are of infinite value. They enrich our lives. Their uniqueness enriches our lives. And they are capable. Now, don't start the other way, because I made this mistake more than once. I used to say, when people said, how'd you first notice your wife? Well, she had this beautiful strawberry blonde hair. It made her mad. You know? Used to be upset at me for that. What if she had different colored hair? Well, you start with you are precious. You're of infinite value, and then you talk about uniqueness, and then you talk about capability, because the world goes at it the other way. The world goes about it with capability first. And the problem with that is, what do you do? What do you contribute to my life in the way of capability becomes not just what are you capable of, but what have you done for me lately? Isn't that what you find on your job often? And if we're being judged by our performance all the time, we're going to have a problem. Remember, does being precious, does the value of a person ever change? That's an open question. Value never changes. Does uniqueness change? Does it change, but it can be more or less fully expressed? Does capability change? Definitely. Okay. When you're a very small child, you don't have a lot of capability. You grow into maturity and adulthood, you have more capability. But then you begin to pass that period and you have less capability. Isn't that right? You know, I remember giving this talk when Michael Jordan was the best basketball player in the world. He isn't that good anymore. Okay? Not saying that he wasn't wonderful. I'm just saying capability declines with age. And if you judge yourself or others by capability, you're going to continually eat away at their value, if that's what their value is. All right. So it's important to understand it must start with precious. They're precious first. That's the most important thing that matters. You must communicate that. We'll look at how we do that in a minute. So capability changes constantly. We must separate value from behavior. And it's the reason I emphasize this and spend so much time on it is that this is the opposite of what you find in society. Yes, dear. I'm going to sit down. Yeah. Yes. Well, the question is, if you haven't received, I've got to repeat them for the, yeah. If you haven't received these messages as a young person, as a child, and in fact, many of us received the opposite, didn't we? If you haven't received those messages, how is it possible for you to pass them on? Right? Is that fair summary? It is. We'll get to that too. Okay, it was the comment is that it can be a real shock to receive those messages. Yes, it can be. So let me take those questions because they're important. Number one, that's one of the reasons for therapy. Two therapists in this room, they can confirm or deny, but that's one of the things you can help people do is to reassess who they are and their value, right? You can start to give them. You can read the Bible. It's a good place to get this. You know, you're the apple of his eye. If you read the Bible, you'll find out that God is willing to do, well, as the wonderful song by Point of Grace is, God loves people more than anything. More than anything, he wants them to know he's rather die than let them go. That's a lot of value right there. Your names are engraved in the palms of his hand. That's why so many people find so much there. So there are good places like that Bible. There are good stories, narratives that we can learn, that begin to tell us and begin to show us. Some of the best narratives show how these messages can make a difference. Now, as to the question of will it be a shock if you receive them, it's worse than that. Early today, in the dialogue, I talked about manipulators. Well, I had a manipulator in my life. I won't go into much detail, but this person was always telling me wonderful things about myself, which were not basically true. And they were used to manipulate me. So when I began to receive these messages, genuine messages, I suspected them of being manipulation. A lot of us have had childhood experiences like that where some of these things which are good for us were used in a bad way and therefore we're wary of them. Am I alone in that? Or it seems to me that's a common thing that happens. You learn not to trust people's words. So what you're saying is that you need more than being told this. It needs to be enacted in your life. Yes. it's daunting for everyone. When I first started dealing with this, as you know, very long time ago now, more than 30 years ago, I discovered that what I would call a nurturing parent, I found that probably there was no more than 1 in 25 children who had a nurturing parent, and probably no more than 125 that had 2 nurturing parents. It's extremely rare. I since have come to the conclusion I may have been overestimating. It's just extremely rare. It is. But here's the bad news about this is that many of us grow up, almost all of us grow up without enough of it. We live in a sinful world, and we're talking about encouraging wives today, helping wives to flourish. But in the 1930s, I used to begin this whole presentation with the story in the 1930s, where in the 1930s they had institutions for children without parents, orphanages, and they found that infants were dying in fairly large numbers, and that these infants were well fed, well clothed, and well housed. They weren't suffering trauma. They weren't suffering disease. They were just dying. And those were the days where they had homes for what were then called retarded, we'd call something else, mentally challenged. And they experimented because these babies were dying, and they were in the state care, and they couldn't figure out what was happening. There was no medical reason for it, as nearly as they could tell. And they found that if they brought girls from the mentally challenged girls over, and they would hold those babies for 15 minutes a day, the dying stopped. It's now well known as failure to thrive. And by the way, it's a crisis among the elderly today. I think that's especially what we saw during COVID, the failure to thrive. People alone all the time without human contact and human encouragement. They were held for 15 minutes. Okay? We all need that. So when I say it's necessary, I'm not saying it's necessary we feel better. I'm saying it is literally necessary to live. If you are alive, you have experienced some of it. But most of us have not experienced nearly enough. As they say, very few homes have one nurturing parent, and many fewer have both. I was blessed. I had one nurturing parent. Didn't feel particularly blessed at the time because of the one that wasn't, but you know what? I was. So here's the thing about it, and it's why I go to the trouble to do this. It is a learned ability. And so if you don't know it, you can learn it. It isn't easy. None of this is easy. Nothing worthwhile is very easy. Difficult but necessary. We live in a world today where we have abundant food and abundant clothing and abundant everything except increasingly human contact. And that's one of the problems of the internet. Always having the distraction, not interpersonal reaction. And by the way, guys, don't be on the phone all the time when you're with your wife. You pay attention. In fact, that will become more important. There are many skills that I cannot share with you today, but one of them is take some time every day, just the two of you, to talk. And that means primarily to listen, but also to talk. Does that help? Yes, that's a good term for it. By spending that time, by the way, whether you spend it with your wife or your children, you are showing their value because you're worth their time. I'm sorry, they're worth your time. You're expending your time. You're spending part of your life to be with them. And that's important. And as you grow older, I think it becomes more important. That's why we almost never turn down an invitation to be where our children and grandchildren are. Anyway, so we separate value from behavior, and we want to make sure that we affirm these things. Now, that's we're going to talk about this, because how do you do this? And we're going to get to that in just a little bit, I think. All right. Yeah, capability. If we are what we do, then when we cannot, we are not. And this is a problem being faced by many elderly people whose abilities have declined. They haven't declined to nothing, but they can't do what they used to do, and they feel worth less. And you know what happens when you say worth less? You combine that into one word, it means no worth at all, doesn't it? Worthless. And that's what happens in the mind. We think because we value ourselves, and this is another part of your answer, we have to first personalize and say, I am precious. I am unique. It is a struggle, but we tend to believe what we say. You know, people, the therapists and others talk about the little tape recorder we have going in our heads, where we say the things. Well, we need to start saying the good things. And that's why the Bible is a good place to go. There are many good places to go to find these positive values where you can see that you make a difference. It's important. So that's the problem with the capability approach, is that if we are what we do, then when we cannot, we are not, and people are feeling that. So capability is, I value you even though I may not value everything you do. And this is where the rub comes. Gentlemen, it's important for you to communicate these positive things to your wives. I have news for you. They're not perfect either. You may have noticed that. You may have remarked on it. Don't know what else to say. It's fascinating. You know, when you're courting, you see everything, through rose-colored glasses, and you see all the positives, and you just sort of ignore the negatives, right? And then you get, there aren't any, yes. You convince yourself there aren't any, and then you get married. And somehow, perspective changes. I know that when we were courting, I was nearly the perfect person. But she found that when she had to live with me, it was rather annoying. These things happen. So the question is, what are you going to do about that? And there are deal breakers. Nothing I say here should be interpreted to say that anybody should stay with a spouse who is physically abusive, for example. That's just one. There are others. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that, maybe this has never happened to you. This happened to me once. My wife, I was doing something, and my wife said something to me. And what she said really hit me wrong. Well, we're having some real good time in the back there. Anyway, she said something which was really hit me the wrong way, and I didn't like it, but I didn't say anything, and I didn't sing the next day. And the third day, well, you can imagine what happens when you have something that's like a burr under your saddle, and it's been there for 3 days, right? It's really sore now. So I didn't say anything in the beginning. By the time I got around to the third day, I was really upset, and so it came out. You said so-and-so the other day. She looked at me sort of surprised and said, that wasn't about you. I hate it when that happens. I had spent 3 days unhappy over something which had nothing to do with me. Had I spoken at the time and said, what was that? And dealt with it, I wouldn't have spent 72 hours in misery and slowly building up the kettle. There was nothing wrong with what she'd done. It was all in me. Well, that's what happens. I see that I have accord with others. All right. So when we're talking about this, we're gonna get into what you do about this, because this is something that has to be done. I know my wife attended a women's ministry some time ago, and they talked about socks on the floor and various other things. They showed this little box, and they put the wife is putting all these things in here that her husband does that annoys her, until the box is full. Once the box is full, she explodes and throws it all at him. You know, that's the way it goes. We're all that way. We're human beings. And so we have to find a way, because there will be irritations in marriage. You know, there will be problems. When my wife and I went through church planter assessment, they gave us, oh man, psychological tests. Remember all that stuff we had to go through, one after the other, and then you got an assessment in person, and then you went through these things together in this mock-up, and it was, oh man, it was frustrating. So finally, at the end of the day, we got our exit interview, and they said, everyone on all of the staff really admire your marriage. Really think you got a great marriage. And I said, thanks. We fought like hell to keep it. Surprised them. But the point is, if you're going to keep a marriage, if it's something that's important to you, you're probably going to have to go through some difficult times. And that's that. Again, that's what growth is a painful business sometimes. All right. So, the cup must be filled from the inside out. The first thing is that you are of infinite value. Never lose sight of that fact. Never let your wife lose sight of the fact that you believe she's of infinite value, not just in general, but to you personally. You know, that she is a treasure. In fact, one of my daughters, I won't say which one, was having phone calls with this guy, and she said to me, well, he just wants to talk and be a friend. And I said, if he hasn't figured out he's got a treasure in you, write him off. You know, husbands, if you don't think she should be a treasure for you, and you should never lose sight of the fact. Don't let the fact that you got married, now you can put on the green eye shade and find all the faults. Okay? When you were courting, you looked at all the good things. You can continue to do that and still be able to deal with the annoyances. All right, but it starts from the inside out. And the way that starts is with acceptance. This is how you start with being precious. You express precious in two ways, one of which I think you will find surprising. Most people do. The first, acceptance. I love you as you are. You need not change to receive my love. If you marry someone in hopes of changing them, you're going to have a real tough time. Now, it is said that men marry women hoping they'll never change, and women marry men hoping they can change them. Jordan Peterson says that based on women's fantasies and so forth, it's the beauty and the beast. She wants to be the beauty who tames the beast. But you need not change to receive my love. And, I see it went away. The other one is, if you change, you will not forfeit my love. Do you want to be able to grow? Growth is change. When my wife and I went through counseling, now some time ago, knew another couple that went through counseling, and the husband said, all I want the girl I married back. Well, he got her. Never really progressed very much. And that's, if you want to improve your marriage, you have to be willing to accept change. Okay. Now, I like you just the way they are. If you don't know what that, play Billy Joel's number. That's a great one. Go changing, just to please me. I love you just the way you are. Mr. Rogers used to say this. Okay? It's important that your wife knows that. Does it mean, again, that everything she does will please you? Wake up. No. We're all people. We're all imperfect. Acceptance means when, okay, guys, let's be honest. What do you do when a woman cries? Let's put it another way. How do you feel about it when a woman cries? Okay. Well, if we had time, I'd show you the video from It's Not About the Nail, because men, correct me if I'm wrong, fellas, but men don't know what to do when a woman cries. And you want to fix it, right? How can I fix this so you won't cry anymore? Women don't want you to fix them. They'll tell you that too. That's it. Men are creatures of action. We want to solve problems. We want to fix things. We want to make them better. Women aren't like that in the same way. And sometimes they just need to cry. And that's tough. But learning to accept that, accepting negative emotions of all kind. I can see you're angry, but I still love you. Those sorts of things are important. It's okay to have these feelings, especially to accept negative emotions, because we all have them. Okay? I break the negative emotions into 3 categories. I'm not saying there aren't other emotions, but I break them down into 3 categories. Fear, grief, and anger. Why do I do that? Well, fear deals with the future. I'm afraid about the future. Anger deals with the present. I'm angry right now. And grief deals with the past. I've lost something that I want. So those are the 3 basic categories for me. And you have to accept those and say, I can see you're grieving. You need to grieve. It's okay. You have to do it in yourself first, but you have to be willing to accept those emotions. And especially when things go wrong. When the casserole is burned, or when something doesn't turn out right, and when there's no mayonnaise for the sandwich. Whatever it is, you have to say, well, it's okay. It's okay. I'm not gonna. You're a human being. It's okay. You made a mistake. We're not gonna get excited about it. It's too easy to let our own anger take over. And by the way, men, what we do is fear and grief are they make us feel helpless, and so we like to convert things into anger so we can act on it. Testosterone makes us want to act, so we just tend to turn everything into anger so we can. Not a good idea. So just being there, being solid, is a way of accepting. All right, so, but what if you can't accept things? There's some things you can't accept and you shouldn't accept. Okay? What if there's a real problem in the relationship? Something that you just don't think you can live with anymore. Okay? Well, I have outlined a process which, well, we'll get there. Okay. Acceptance is never conditioned on performance. And this comes out in, oh, sweetie, I love it when you make my favorite dish. I love you when you do that. No, you love her when she doesn't make anything. You love her all the time. Do you see how that becomes hinged on performance? I love you when. I love you if. Okay? Yeah, I love you because, it better not be because of behavior. I love you because you're so precious to me. That sort of thing. So we don't condition anger on performance in any way. Acceptance on that. And otherwise we will, and it's easy to get into that trap. So the flip side of acceptance, and it is the flip side, it is because your wife is precious that you have to confront her. Now you may say, why? What does confrontation have to do with acceptance or loving someone? Well, what do you do with somebody you don't care about when they do something you get upset about? You write them off, right? You know? You don't need to confront them. Or if you do, it's very brusque and get out of my way sort of thing. That's not a good confrontation. You confront someone because you don't want to lose the relationship, but you want to make it better. And that's the key. This is William Blake. He's famous poet and artist. His most famous poem is Tiger, Dagger, Burning Bright in the Darkness of the Night. But this one is really good. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not. My wrath did grow. Remember when she said something about me that had nothing to do with me, but I was ticked off? What happened? 3 days later, I'm furious. What a waste of energy. But here it's true. If it's a real problem, you don't confront it. You don't tell your friend, your beloved. Don't tell your wife. She doesn't know. Can't be resolved. So that's the first thing. And by the way, when you confront this, the first thing you do is you confront yourself. And you say, is this really something that she is doing that she shouldn't be doing? Is this really something that's just my problem? You know, one of those childhood traumas we talked about. And I'm triggering, what she did was innocuous, but I'm triggering because I've got a problem. The first thing you do is confront yourself. You also confront yourself with, how much is this worth to me? In other words, there are some things you can learn to tolerate. Shoshana, you told me once that, there 5 or 7 things about your mate that will never change? Indelible, yeah, see, now that's a little stronger language than I like, but indelible problems, okay. Unsolvable. Okay. Oh, and now my wife chimes in, yes. She wishes she'd known that in the last millennium. So, yeah, I mean, there are some things that, and the question is, are you willing to dissolve the marriage for that? Well, most of them, the answer is probably not. So you may just have to live with that. Some they're insolvable and they're not going to go away. You have to decide, can I live with that? Here's what confrontation is not. You don't go to the other person and say, here's what you did wrong. And by the way, you don't start out with this, this is one example. Why did you lie to me? Yeah. Yeah, in fact, we're going to get here in a minute. One of the things you do when in this kind of confrontation is you speak about your emotions and you speak about them in the first person. I felt this. When you did this, I felt this, right? And I had one woman look at me and say, well, okay, I'll use my feelings. I feel like you're a jerk. It's like, no, that's not it. So we'll get there. You don't start out by telling the other party what they did wrong. That's not what real confrontation is. Now, we wait. The reason most of us don't like it is we wait until it is accelerated to a point where there will be conflict. There does not have to be conflict at every confrontation. It is simply facing. To confront is to face something, to face a difficulty, to face a problem. Telling the other party how they must change. Well, you can try that. I don't recommend it. That's not real confrontation. Okay? Finding and telling the truth. Excuse me. And the truth about the relationship. So I heard you say the other day, XYZ, whatever it was, is this a big problem? Now, notice you didn't say, you said this. I heard. Because maybe what you'll find out is that your wife didn't say those words. You translated them in your head. I've done that. I think everybody does that. They hear something, they transfer it and put it into a memory, and it isn't what was said at all. So that's why you don't start out by an accusatory thing. You want to find the truth first. Don't forget my example of being upset for something that had nothing to do with me. Okay? You said this the other day. I heard you say this the other day. Why did you say that to me? And the answer is, I didn't say it to you or about you. Okay? So that's where you start. You need to find out, and you say, well, maybe you say, when this happens, talking about childhood traumas and triggers, when you do this, it frightens me. When you do this, I feel insecure. Now, guys, we don't like doing that because we're guys. We aren't afraid of anything except upsetting our wives. No. We start out with, we need to start out, instead of looking for a cause for action, you need to find out if there is a cause. So confronting is about finding and telling the truth. And if you do this early enough and low enough in the level of conflict, it's an easy thing. And you just smooth right over these things. It's letting them sit and fester that make the problem. So here's my model as currently. I say it's a work in progress. Does it look anything like the one I gave you? Yeah, me either. I couldn't find it. It wasn't the dog that ate my homework. It was the cloud. But anyway, here it is. What? The cloud rained on my parade. We face a challenge with our spouse in our life. And so then, can we adapt to that? Is it something that is it's not a deal breaker, it's just a minor annoyance? Maybe we can find a way to adapt to it that's not that big a deal. If the answer is yes, you just go on with your life. If the answer is no, then you confront. As I said, first you confront yourself, but that was part of the up there. And then you discuss it with your spouse, with your wife. And the question is, can we adapt? Is there some change that either of us, is there a middle ground? Is there some way we can work this out? And if the answer is no, or if the adaptation doesn't work, one party's not doing it, or it's not working for one of them, then you go back through the cycle and you keep negotiating until you find a solution, or you find that the division is way deeper than you thought. Now, I don't think that's an ideal solution, but that's why I have the no with the dotted line. You may go through the cycle 2 or 3 times and eventually say, no, I just can't do this anymore. This is too big, it's too important. Otherwise, you just keep going through the cycle till you find something, find some common ground, and then you move on with your life.
Yeah, this is really like the quality improvement process of a relationship. So you're not aligned all the way to the quality of the relationship.
Okay, so this is pretty close to what? Okay. Yeah, like I say, I fed it up in the cloud and it didn't say anything, and then I went to reload it to work some more on it and said, it's not there anymore. Yes? Right? You're talking down here at the bottom here. No, right. Right. Ah. Well, the reason I did it this way. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, actually, there's a whole, I didn't have the time to do it, and plus we wouldn't have the time to go through it. There's a whole list of things you can do. One is you can attend, what I call a skill of attend, which is simply paying attention. You may notice that there's a pattern that they don't notice, and that can be dealt with at a different stage of the process. Okay? There's confession, there's affirming, there's a whole bunch of things that can be fed into this in the interim. The reason I put it this way, though, is that sometimes, and maybe I'm wrong, I will be corrected if I am, sometimes the minor annoyances on the surface are actually simply symptoms of a deeper problem. That's what I'm thinking. And you may find that out through repeated confrontation. One person may be maybe just going through the motions to keep peace or something, and you find out eventually, I really don't, I don't care about that much. Whatever you want, that's not my problem. That can be a deal breaker. Does that make sense to you? There may be an attitude which is very deep, which is essentially uncaring or even abusive, and this is just the way it shows up on the surface. It appears to be a small matter, but when you pursue it, it runs all the way down to deep in the relationship. I'm saying, no, I'm not saying they can't be resolved. I'm saying that you may find out that one person says, I don't care to resolve it. I'm not willing to do that.
But the way they are today isn't necessarily the way they would be 5 years ago. Their don't care attitude isn't necessarily for everybody.
I understand that, but the problem is, again, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me there can be deep issues that are betrayed by surface actions. And that some of those.
I don't disagree with your premise. I disagree with this is unreconcilable.
Well, that is a product of multiple trips through this. That's the whole point. Eventually you find out that's just not going to be addressed. Sometimes that people are that's by being willing. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That what's happening on the surface is merely an indication of this deeper saying, no, I'm not going to do that kind of work. Not for you. Well, isn't that what happens sometimes? Yeah. One hopes this is extremely rare. But, well, this may be, as I said, it's a work in progress. It may be refined. I suspect it will be. Maybe on my hide. Well, we're about done here. All right. Approval is your existence enriches my life, and you can say, this is how husbands say to their wives, your smile, your presence gives me peace. There are dozens of ways of saying to someone, your existence enriches my life. I'm so much better because I feel better when you're here. I'm happier when I'm around you. A lot of ways of expressing that, and that it's uniquely to you. Now, again, I have at least eight other techniques, which there's not time to go through in this short session. But that's what we want to do is, and the difference between approval and tolerance and acceptance is this. Tolerance says, I won't oppose you. You're all right. It's okay. Acceptance says, you're welcome. Come in. Approval says, here's a place just for you. This is a place just for you. We want you. Not only are you welcome here, but there's a place that is safe, that you fill this place like no one else. And that's the idea of your uniqueness. So that's the beginnings of how to fill the cup. Be aware of them. First of all, the knowledge, remember we talked about that. Knowledge, realizing that precious, unique, and capable are the things that need to be communicated, and in that order. And then we need to, our perception must change. We must see when there are opportunities to do that. And I don't know if I should tell this story. I have your permission? When we were going through counseling, sometimes she'd go through some painful experiences, and she was crying one day. And I'm like any other guy. I don't want a woman to cry. I want to fix it. But I couldn't. And I'd learned that. And she was crying. And I said, I wish each tear was like a diamond. I could give you a diamond. And there was something else. Each smile is like a gem. The idea was you were precious. And then I talked about who she was in my life, her uniqueness, and so forth. Does that make sense? You're expressing this sense of being precious. They improve your life. They make the world a better place. And all of those things are ways of expressing. So the first thing is the knowledge. I've given you knowledge now of the 3 messages that really matter. The second thing is the perception, recognizing when they're needed, when they're missing. Okay? When someone says, I'm just no good because I can't do this or that, that's it. They're feeling that their value is based on their performance. And that's when you step in and say, it doesn't change your value. You're still everything in the world to me. And then the third one will be learning to do it in real time. That's the hard part. Not only seeing it, but if you can journal, it helps, because you write down, this is what happened today, and then 2 days later, I should have done this, And so it's how you're able to, otherwise we just go through doing the same things over and over again. But having a journal is something that allows us to see when the opportunities were occurred and we didn't recognize them, or we didn't act on them. And slowly you can turn that knowledge into perception, and eventually into appropriate action, so that it happens at the time it needs to happen. I think we're just about, that's about it, yeah. So, any other questions? Especially about my troubled graphic, anyway, never mind. About that process. It's a complicated one to go through. Difficult to get the idea, but there has to be this continual, it's continual communication. And it does make a difference. I had an uncle, and he, when they were first married, his wife made a pie. And he said the crust wasn't crispy enough or something. She never baked him another pie. I think this was a case where there might have been a need for some communication. But anyway, that's, if we want our wives to flourish, we need to know what they need, and we need to help supply it. That's part of you talk about the fatherhood challenge. That's part of the husband challenge. Oh dear, I may feel a podcast coming on. Well, thank you for joining us. Are there any questions on the internet anybody has seen? Okay. Well, thank you all who joined us, and I hope this has been helpful and useful and enriches your experience. How bad was it? It's pretty tough with this.